Welcome back to the H3X Podcast, where we explore the head, heart, and hands of the multiplying church and her leaders. And here with Dave, back in the backyard. I'm in a different location today, but we're going to hop into a fun topic, I think, together around this idea of the training cycle. I sometimes will call it model, assist, watch, and then the controversial L of launch or leave. And we are going to specifically dial into that last letter of L. Is it launch? Is it leave? And how does that factor into the work of raising up and multiplying leaders?
Yeah, I think it has everything to do with what we're referencing when we say MAWL. Are we talking about a person? Are we talking about a skill? Are we talking about a character trait? I think all those things and those dynamics help us understand what's the best way to use that MAWL acronym when raising up leaders.
Yeah, and so that last letter of the acronym of model, assist, watch, L, launch or leave, we had a co-laborer recently, and I thought it was a good way to set us up for this topic. But he said, I think the L was always meant to be leave, because for those of us that have used launch, which I have for years, model, assist, watch, launch, launch actually happens during the watch phase. You actually launch somebody out to begin to engage in the new skills they're learning. In the watch phase, you're actually watching the quality of their work. And then leave is important as a component of the training cycle development. And I think that's a good spot to start with, because we don't want to leave people, I think, is why we don't like that L word of being leave. But what if that's actually a key piece of the process, is where I want to set us up for today.
Yeah, and I think jumping into the strategic absence, to use a phrase that you were using earlier, in leadership development is a great idea for us to kick around today on the podcast, knowing and understanding that people don't grow in new skills and in new activities as long as someone's hovering over them, telling them what to do. And we got to give them an opportunity to fail without being seen and try to recover themselves. So what are some ideas you've got around that strategic absence when it comes to leadership development?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is, I think if we don't know how to develop leaders, which a lot of us are not, I think there's those of us that are really we're either good at attracting leaders that are already competent. And so we attract them, and then we drop them in and we say, hey, and then your influence and everything kind of flows through the level of competency of people that you attract. Or you draw a lot of people and you tend to become the center of it all, and you just add, but you never actually raise people up to shoulder height, as we'll say. But the reality is the kingdom, the multiplication of the kingdom really rides on the multiplication of leaders. And then that leads us to this place of saying model, assist, watch. We've got to actually multiply those skills into somebody. And if we don't, at some point, give them the space to own the skills that they're learning with confidence, or the process they're learning, and actually say, this is not just what Dave has told me. No, I am committed to this for myself. They'll always have questions and they'll never fully be bought in. And so it's this idea that leave is actually really strategic and important. And whether that's just, if we simplify it all the way down to saying, a gospel tool, which we always go back to this example of the 3 circles. If I'm always model, assist, watching, and then I'm hovering and nearby this person, and I'm giving them a little bit of feedback, I'm stepping in, or even I'm just not fully giving them full space to do it, there's going to be something in the back of their mind of, this is Dave's tool, this is Mark's tool, this is somebody else's tool, or I need them present to be able to do this. The actual stepping back and leaving the skill with the person in a situation where they have to do it, it actually allows them to full on take ownership of it as a part of their identity and process.
Well, I know me personally, whenever I'm learning something new or doing something that I've not done before, I'm a personality that's saying, just give it to me and let me go do it. Give me the basics and let me go figure it out. And if I have questions, I'll come back and ask you. And I think for me, one of the things that's most annoying is when someone micromanages me on something new, because I like the way in which I learn the lessons is I go and do the lesson I learned because of a mistake that I made or something that I do myself with my hands, and I have an aha moment, that aha moment in the context of the structure that was given to me, I'm much more likely to remember that aha moment than if somebody told me that I should have that aha moment. Because as for me, Mark, I'm just saying, like, somebody tells me, oh, this, and this, then I'll go, yeah, and I'll remember a lot of those things, but I won't learn them. When they happen to me, that's whenever they kind of take root.
Yeah. Because it goes from information, or even information that's applied, to information that you're owning it, and you're actually you're applying it within the rest of your understanding, and it becomes integrated. That's the word I'm looking for. It becomes integrated when you actually are required to own it in that way, right?
Well, I grew up as a farm kid, and so there was a lot of tractor backing that would go on. And if I had my grandfather and my uncle and my dad all there behind me, and I was the one backing up the tractor, we were never going to get it backed up, because every single one of them was barking at me instructions and things that I should do and ways that I should do it. And what ends up happening is I just put the tractor in park, got out, and said, one of y'all do it, right? Because they wouldn't allow me to do it. But if I had none of them, then I could go back to tractor up how I wanted to, and I learned all kinds of lessons, in the process of doing that. For people who are listening and aren't farm boys, they'll never understand what that dynamic is of having an uncle and dad and a grandpa all yelling at you at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times, if we don't give that strategic absence, our people that are leveling up will have the same reaction that I did. Put that sucker in park, get down, and say, well, then you just do it, because we're constantly nitpicking at them instead of letting them go try.
Yeah. We are. And, I think of, there's a couple of examples that come to my mind from the word Jesus, the master disciple maker and leader developer. You see him doing some strategic leave at multiple points. And even it seems like he does model leave, which is controversial, right? But you could say with the demoniac, does he do much more than he models for the guy? He shares the gospel with him, and then he says, go to your friends and family and share what God has done for you. And it might not seem like it was the best discipleship, but then the whole region hears the testimony of this guy. And then we see Jesus raising up his disciples. We see Peter, we see all these guys thinking that they've really absorbed and understand all this stuff from Jesus. And then he basically says, Peter, you're going to deny me. And then he ascends, he leaves, and that allows Peter to really, his identity to emerge, and him to really own that he is committed and he is all in. And then he ends up getting that commission in Acts 1:8, and they go. But I just wonder how much of that factored in for Peter, the leave part of it, that if he had still had Jesus there, none of that would have come up in him, and he wouldn't have full on taken ownership of the mission.
Well, it's kind of like a one-on-one discipleship conversation. Whenever I'm one-on-one with somebody, I always stay the teacher and they always stay the student. And it's really, 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 really hard to break that when the teacher is there, because the student, and I think in a lot of ways, rightfully, is submitting to that teacher. In the case of Peter and Jesus, it makes total sense that Peter would constantly be deferring to Jesus. And in order for Jesus to get to the place where he's like, I need you to own this, I need you to take responsibility for this, then I'm just saying from my own personal experience, it always says a whole lot when a leader or someone training me or someone who's mentoring me says, you got this, and then they leave. It says to me, I trust you, right? Yeah. And that builds an incredible amount of confidence to say, I'm entrusting you with this, which means you have the ability to fail or to succeed, and I'm going to let you do either one. For me, as a leader, that says to me, I trust you, and that builds great confidence. Some people flounder under that, but I think that also tells us a lot about their leadership capacity and where they are in growth, is if we try to do the watch phase, strategic absence, and then they just can't even function, then we know we're pushing too fast at that point. But I think that confidence piece has everything to do with it, where the leader saying to the mentor or the mentee, I trust you.
Yeah. And I think we'll oftentimes in our circles today point to Acts 13 and 14 as this picture, as this blueprint for how the first missionary journey happened and the what the work is. Well, I think that was a factor in there for Barnabas and Paul as well. I trust you. I trust you guys. They moved on to the next town. They felt they had a confidence in these even new very new disciples, that they would continue forward with what they had received. And then the absence also becomes helpful. They come back, and leaders are determined by those that have taken responsibility and ownership in that gap. And so there was a trust that they expressed by leaving, and then that leaving allowed the gap to raise up some leaders through it.
I think for me, if you don't mind pivoting a little bit to the practical and some ways in which I engage this actual phase in a leader's life, the 1 minute manager, I use that process of self-leadership a lot because it's setting up 1 minute goals where you have somebody, you meet with them and you're saying, okay, what are you going to be doing this week? And then you catch them doing something right? And so you got 1 minute redirects, so you got 1 minute encouragements. But as a leader, you're asking them to figure out what they need to do. You set your own goals. And then as a leader, you do all you can to catch them doing something right in that goal setting, because I think this transition is really the self-leadership concept where people have to decide, what do I do next? And you're not there to tell them what to do next. You look at them and say, what do you think we should do next? Yeah. And that ability to then take the next 1 or 2 steps is a real big transition mark for people to go into leadership, because then they have to go from what's right in front of me to, is what I'm doing now, how is it going to affect what comes next? And that's a skill that has to be developed and practiced.
It's a skill to be developed, and it is, if we continue using the analogy of tools and toolbox, there's got to be tools in the toolbox and some familiarity with those. And then when you're saying, what do you think we should do? You're not asking that of somebody who's never seen a hammer before. They are familiar with it, and they're saying, oh, well, I know what to do. I think this is what they would do. And then they jump in and they do it. So that's why we have short-term discipleship package or process, that we're training disciples in some basic tools and process, and then we release them and then they actually need that. They need that step where they say, what do you think you should do? And that allows them to take ownership of it.
Well, I think in this phase too, one of the sweetest times in terms of developing a leader or developing a disciple is whenever they finally get to this phase and you give them the strategic absence, and then they come and they tell you what happened and then ask your input. Instead of saying, what should I have done? They come and say, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I did. Right. And then that simple little question of, would you have done it that way? Because that tells me they own it. And it also tells me now that they're searching for some wisdom and they want feedback. And when you get a leader that transitions from tell me what to do to I'll go and do it to I did it, what did you think about the way that I did it? That third little step right there is the sweet spot in this watch phase, this strategic exit, because at that point, you've got somebody who's saying, I want to own this, but I want to get better at it. And not just somebody who says, don't bother me anymore, I don't want to talk to you anymore. They're learning and they want to grow in that area. And that's really a great sweet spot in this season.
I think it is. And so we have had an aversion. Maybe this is, I don't know who developed, who took model assist, watch, leave, and made it launch. We've had an aversion to leave because we have our abandonment issues of, we're being abandoned or whatever that comes out. But if we can get over that, then we can actually begin to see that it's not about abandoning a disciple or somebody abandoning us, but it's about growing us up and us growing up disciples to be who they're called to be. And so if we remove that and we just go with launch out of that sense of not wanting to be abandoned, or we're actually removing that disciple's ability to grow into all that God has for them to be.
And I've also found, especially this summer, as we've been doing some Saturday intensives, the question was asked with the guys that are going through the intensive with me. They're like, so what does that look like after everything's finished up? And I said, not what you think. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, the best friends that I have on this planet are the guys that I have walked with, beside, they've learned from me, I've learned from them. And they're the ones that are now shoulder height. And the shoulder height guys have now become the best friends. And I said, the ironic thing is that you say, yeah, we're going to leave or we're going to launch you. And then people go, oh, well, I want to keep the relationship. Well, after you've gone through this process with somebody for 3, 4, 5 years, that relationship is so strong at that point that it's probably the best relationships that I've had in my life are the people who come through this process. It's not a, I don't see you ever again. It's very much a long-term relationship that pops up every now and then, maybe not every day, maybe not every week, but every time we get together, it's super easy to just pick up where you left off.
Yep. So we're going with leave, model, assist, watch, leave.
Sure. We'll go with leave, Mark. Whatever makes your heart happy.
We decided right now, though. Yeah, this is helpful to talk through this, Dave, because, again, I think if we don't learn how to raise up leaders, it becomes the bottleneck for multiplication. And we can talk every day of the week about things that are wrong with the traditional church model, or every day of the week about what if we saw fourth generation multiplication in multiple streams, all this stuff. We can talk about the vision of it, but unless we learn the skills of how to identify and then model, assist, watch, and launch or leave leaders, we're not going to actually see no place left. So it is pretty critical that we address that strategic absence gap that's needed in raising up leaders.
So when we finish up this podcast today, we do talk about the head, heart, and hands of the multiplying church and our leaders. And it's very important for us to focus in on the head, the knowledge that they need to have, the heart, what's their character, what's their development, and the hands, what is the skills that they have. And I think that triad of head, heart, and hands has everything to do with what we're talking about. It's not just the person, but how do we develop their head? How do we develop their heart? How do we develop their hands? And we launch a holistic leader that's ready to stay convicted and keep going when it gets tough.
Thanks for listening, for watching. If this content has been helpful for you, please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us to get this content out there farther, to serve Jesus, grow his kingdom, and accomplish the Great Commission until there is no place left. Much love to you guys. See you next time.